Hello, everybody. Greetings and salutations and yada, yada, yada. Axian Spice was kind enough to send me a while back a copy of, two different supplements, OSR supplements, this being one of them, part of their series called Lands of Legends. This is Lands of Legends Grim. There are two documents. If you go to Drive Through RPG, I'm not sure if you get it in other spots or where else it's available, how it comes, but there are basically two PDFs. One that's called front, one that's called back. I believe this one is the front one. I think I looked at the covers and looks like one is Areas, which is this one that you could see. Oh, you can't see it. Now you can see it. This one's called Areas. I believe the other book or booklet is called Encounters. I'm not sure how much of this I will get through during this lunchtime stream, since I try to keep them to an hour, more or less. But we'll see how far I get into it, and if I don't get through this one or I get through this one, I will probably do the other one, what's left of this one, the other one, or however I can do it, get through the rest of it tomorrow or in the next stream or video, which I will try to do tomorrow. As usual with these, just to reset, when I do these read-alongs, I have not looked at these books. I always look at it like as if, hey, we're at a gaming shop, hanging out, checking out what's new, and I flip through the book and see if I like it, dislike it, what I could use it for, etc., etc. So this is what you're going to be seeing is just my reactions and everything as we go. And of course, if you're here live in the chat, feel free to shoot in questions, comments, anything at all. Well, within the bounds of normalcy and decency, and I'll try to respond if and as I can. Oops, let me get my cursor over. Created by Giuseppe Rolando. I don't want to. Rotundo, Mauro Longo, and Federico Martinetto and Matteo Garesa. Sorry in advance if I goofed on those names. The font at that size, at least zoomed out so I could see the whole page at once, isn't the best. Okay, so boy, they really just hop right into it, right? There's no intro. We just got some numbers and some entries. I'm just going to flip forward a little bit because I just want to see if this is how the whole thing goes. You know, it might be more meant for print. Let me see if I can. It's gonna lose my wonderful view. Let me see if I can change the page display. Yeah, 2-page view. Let's go back to full screen mode. Am I going to get 2 pages? Why am I getting one? All right, so I'm going to have to go to this view, which is not quite as nice. But at least in this view, I can see everything all together, which I think is how it was meant to be. You kind of open it, and you're given 10. So let's go through these. I usually like a little bit of an intro, but maybe these will be self-explanatory, more or less. It looks like this first one, we're looking at a list of civilizations. Let's just read one and see what we get out of it. So the first one is Verbenia. Half hidden in the middle of a large swamp, this village is made of wooden cabins and hovels. It's a place of hags, rejects, and outlaws, ruled by the infamous Arjun Babe. The commoners of this despicable settlement farm and trade poison mushrooms, dangerous herbs, and strange weeds, and rear magical beasts to sell them to evil wizards and arenas. All right, so now we are getting an idea of what these are. Maybe civilizations is probably a little bit grand a term for a single village, but potentially, I guess, its own culture. So we can argue about the semantics of what constitutes a civilization versus just a lone settlement. But these seem like clearly you can drop these into your areas. Let's read. I probably won't read all 10. I'm just going to read a couple of them. I'll read the next one, though, because it seems interesting to me. Moldy elves. I just like the idea of moldy elves. that's just that just speaks to me. And Roman Live says, "Dang, all my prepared questions were really obscene." Yeah, I thought they were. It was specifically for you, Terrence, that I put that warning out there. This is a family program. You already forced me to run my interview with you as explicit, so I just wanted to keep you in check from the start. All right, ruled by a masked sorcerer, these decadent, gray-skinned elves live in a swampy land and inhabit the ruins of black temples built by an extinct race. They farm mushrooms and slugs and practice hermetic poetry and astrology. They are immune to most poisons but fear direct sunlight, -2 to all rolls. So this is interesting, right? It's kind of a different take on an elvish civilization. Also live in swamps. Do these all live in swamps? So the first one was in the swamps. This one's in the swamps. I like the blank temples, and I like that it's sort of left open-ended. We can pick in our own setting what kind of extinct species built those temples. It always makes me think, those kind of things, when you see black temples, makes me think of Stygia from Conan stories. They're also into mushrooms, but also slugs. I like the hermetic poetry and astrology. That's a nice touch. Give them a little bit of character. And then we get a little bit of mechanical stuff, right? They're immune to most poisons, but they don't like direct sunlight. So I guess in that swamp, they must stick to the temples, and maybe there's big overhanging willows or mangroves or something else that give them shade. All right, let's. I'm going to skip through a couple of these. I'm going to go to number 9, the City of the Purple Lord. I like the title. This large city-state has recently been conquered by a mysterious and tyrannical warlord and sorcerer, the Purple Lord. Apparently, nobody knows his secret. He was a general of the city's army who was sent to fight a war. All of his army was destroyed, but he survived, and somehow, somewhere, he retrieved the 10 magic rings of Akanuba, which grant him extraordinary powers. With his new magic arsenal and an army of monsters, he returned and conquered the city. Heroes hearing of the legendary rings and tracking the place where they should have been hidden might find out the secret of the Purple Lord and perhaps break his cruel rule. So that's definitely both a location and a potential plot hook. Potential campaign right there, overthrowing the Purple Lord and seizing the rings. The 10 magic rings of Akanuba. That one's pretty cool. And I'll do the last one, number 10, Overstorm. This colossal city, with its thousands of slaves, is ruled by 7 aristocratic houses, each controlling a separate district with an iron fist. The successors of each dynasty are trained in the arts of combat and magic, and when the Lord or Lady of Overstorm passes away, they battle for supremacy in the city's great arena to determine who will be the new overlord of the city. Besides the Games of the Throne, the Games of the New Moon are a great venue for fighters and sorcerers who want to make a name for themselves and win the prize that is offered by a different house every new moon. All right, so kind of like a different take on the Game of Thrones concept. Here we have the Games of the Throne, and it is literally a games, some kind of arena setup, and you can imagine lots of intrigue. So looking at this, I kind of think if I was going to use this would be, I would want to use this kind of at the beginning of my brainstorming of locations in my setting, or if my party was heading and there was no destination, or they're heading somewhere kind of completely new. Because the one thing with these is they're sort of all over the place in terms of what hex they would be in if I was going to work this into a hex crawl. So if I knew I was going to the swamps, rolling on this table wouldn't really be useful because there's only a couple of them that are in the swamps. And of course, if I was in an Underdark, I see there's one called the City Below that would be useful. But then they don't say much about what kind of terrain Overstorm is in, so maybe that would work. The City of the Purple Lord could potentially work, right? But I couldn't just mix and match. So I'd want to maybe use this when sort of the map is wide open and I can put the hexes that belong to these with them, as opposed to fitting these into already existing hexes. Or unless I was going to find somewhere on the map and say, oh, this goes in swamps, and here's swamps, I'm going to put it here. But these do sound like good inspiration. They very much have that Star Trek Farscape vibe, where they'll travel to a planet and the planet will essentially have one society or potentially one or two competing societies, and I can see definitely in a Star Trek episode, maybe they've even done in the Star Trek episode already, or Farscape, or both, some kind of a city where the aristocrats do arena combat to determine who sits on the throne next. Cool. So let's see what else we've got. Grim Deserts. So now these, I kind of like this just as a format in terms of, okay, if I need a desert location, I can just come to this table. Civilization one, because to me, the one thing with those is they don't feel like huge civilizations. They feel more like settlements, something that would be kind of within one hex. But, like I was saying before, I couldn't have a hex in mind when I rolled that table. I'd kind of have to roll that table and then find or create the hex I need for it. This one, hey, we're going to the desert. Oh, I need something. Let me roll on this table and see what's here. It's maybe a little bit more useful to me. Let's see what the entries are like. Let's see. I'll just do the first one to start, the Desert of Bones. This desert is made of the bones of countless creatures calcified by the sun and now reduced to dust. The wind carries cries of death, and the region is haunted by dire spirits. Travelers who don't take special cautions are forced to breathe the dust and may be possessed by one of the ravenous wraiths of the region. Save versus spells once per night. A possessed character can be exorcised with a turning undead. As long as the character is under the spirit's control, he will be handled by the DM as a vicious and devious creature that has no other purpose than to massacre all the party members. That's cool. So, this is one of those instances, right, where I could really delve more into this Desert of Bones concept, but of course you have to fit it in this little box, so you can't. The one probably thing I would do is, just for my own purposes, is probably disregard the parts at the bottom about, well, one, I would probably want to allow the player to maintain control of the character. I would give them, like, here's the spirit's objective. You carry it as you see fit. And hand in hand with that is I would want to give the spirits different objectives. Like, I think just massacring everybody is just not the most interesting objective. And it's either one that is going to be something that's easily overcome by the party. If you're all standing around, it's high noon, and then someone turns to attacking you, you're 1 against 5, so chances are you're just going to go down fast, and maybe you take somebody with you if they spend a couple rounds trying not to just bludgeon you, and of course just bludgeon you until you submit, or you're just going to go down quickly. And then if it's something like it happens at night when you're on watch, then you just slitting throats, and unless you're playing without kind of a coup de grace type rule, then it's just you killed everybody. But if the spirit needs something, and that relates to something inside this Desert of Bones, and maybe you go off on your own, now the party has to find you, and maybe they can't rid you of the spirit because they don't have a cleric, or their turning undead fails, and so now maybe it becomes a whole adventure of trying to help the spirit fulfill this objective it needs to free the character. Like, that's a lot more interesting. So I would probably cross off that stuff and then add some different objectives that could happen. Let's see. Ovaltine Patrol says the Purple Lord might try to take over that other city by sending the players to take care of the 7 heirs so nobody can compete. Yep. That's another one, right? And I think in going back to that city, there's a lot of interesting intrigues. I imagine that there probably is rules against, maybe within a year or a couple of years of this tournament, that the heirs can't just poison each other, but the players are not from the city, potentially. Or, they could be, but let's just say they're not. Then maybe they fall outside those rules. Or what if they are, hired by somebody, hired by somebody, hired by somebody, hired by someone else in one of those families to discreetly get rid of the other ones while keeping that one heir clean, right? The heir didn't technically do anything. Nothing can be traced to them, so they'll win by default. Or like Ovaltine Patrol suggesting, maybe there's an exterior force that wants to take everybody out for their own ends. All right, back to the deserts. That was the Desert of Bones, which I really liked, but I would change up the stuff about what the spirit wants just to make it more interesting. And it's always hard with these kind of supplements because I know you're trying to fit in a bunch of stuff in a small book, but this, and so look space is a premium. And I'm thinking like, oh boy, there's all this other stuff I could build into the Desert of Bones, and there's no room for it here. So you got to do that work yourself. But it's kind of achieved its purpose in that regard, right? Because it's fired up my imagination. It's got me thinking about all kinds of stuff I could do with that, and that is good. Let's skip down to number 3, the Cauldron. This desert valley is covered with salt crystal soil, and it is shaped like a circular caldera. A mirage shimmering in the center of the basin shows a vast expanse of water with white minarets standing over it. However, as the explorers approach it, the temperature increases on and on. Around the exact center of the valley, near the site of the mirage, the cauldron works like a burning glass. Anyone who approaches it catches fire. Only fiery creatures can live in the area. I think so. A little bit confusingly written. I think what it's saying is it's got this mirage in the middle. It's going to make you think of water, and I'm not sure what the minarets seem kind of weird there, but maybe it's just fantastical, right? So there's some kind of large lake, and there are these kind of tall, skinny spires, minarets at the corners. Maybe if it's mostly squarish or whatever, the intervals. Of course, it is a mirage. When you get to the center, I want to say they're probably thinking it's like when you put a light through a magnifying glass and it creates a beam. I don't know that we need that metaphor. Maybe it's just whatever it is, hotter and hotter. I would say that taking this idea, scratch the not the temperature increase, but I would just lose the burning glass analogy. I'm not sure if that's meant to be literally the sand turns to glass, which might be interesting. It becomes almost a trap. If it's some way sand, glass, and you kind of slide towards the center and you're burning up. So maybe that would work. But have it be a literal portal to the plane of fire. If we can't explain, we don't need to necessarily explain why it's getting hotter. I think maybe that's what the burning glass is for, is to explain this is why you're getting hotter and hotter. But no, just at the center of it is a portal, a two-way entrance to the plane of fire, and this is where fire elementals and other creatures who live in fiery places, this is where they hang out, or this is keeping me away where they can come and go from the plane of fire into this plane, and vice versa. So I would change a couple things, but it's inspirational, right? So that it suits its purpose in my book. Sand golems like this one. Number 5. This desert has a peculiar curse. After D8 hours spent on its sands, explorers begin to cough sand, and their fingertips begin to crack without bleeding. Their tongue becomes so dry that it's impossible to talk and cast spells. Soon after, the party is attacked by raging, maddened sand golems of human size. After the fight, surviving characters must save every 6 hours versus petrification. After the first failure, a victim becomes fatigued. After the second one, exhausted. After the third one, he turns into a mindless sand golem. The curse ends, leaving the desert if the victim has not yet become a golem. So this is kind of, it is a location, but it's also really an encounter, right? Because it's not just talking about kind of what's here, but it's talking about something that's actually happening in here. Sand golems, these things are interesting. I'm curious if they stat up a sand golem anywhere, or I don't know. I'm sure there's somewhere. Probably someone has already created sand golems, obviously, especially in an OSR scenario. We could easily stat up sand golems ourselves. I like the idea of things happening to you in this desert. I don't know. I haven't played through it, and I don't know if these have been play tested. 6 hours, that might be a little bit rough. I might go once a day. I don't know. It depends how big the desert is. Clearly, this is going to be somewhere that the party's going to try to get in and get out as fast as possible. How often did it say that those sand golems were attacking you? Okay, soon after. Yeah, I might put, because it's written in a very, focused, this happens, this happens, this happens, right? So I would, change that up, but maybe I would put chances of encountering sand golems is 2 in D6. Roman Lip says, I love a good weird environmental hazard. Oh, yes. I mean, that's that kind of the best word for what the sand golems thing is. It really is a hazard. In this case, we assume, we would assume that the whole place is this singular hazard. You just got to make sure there's something worthwhile on the other side, because who's going to want to go through that craziness unless there's something really good in there or on the other side that you can't get through by a different means. I'm just kind of just cruising my eyes through these other ones. Let's do number 8, and then I'll move on. This one's called Shadow Eaters. In this desert, sentient beings produce no shadow. The nomads say that the land is cursed and that the desert demons steal and devour the shadows. The light and the sand absorb shadows and burn souls. That's definitely flavorful. Travelers must pass a daily save versus death or become confused for the rest of the day. Losing 3 times in a row, this roll causes the permanent loss of one's shadow and the loss of a level. Level 1 characters simply die. Oof, so it's a little bit confusingly written, but presumably if you fail your save 3 times, that would mean that you'd have 3 days to get through, right? Because once a day, where we're going, but if you do fail, you become confused. And obviously, depending on your system, you can figure out what being confused would mean. Hopefully, the whole party doesn't become confused. That would be bad. Losing the shadow is a really interesting, kind of nice thing. And I could see it actually being a benefit in some ways. I think some sneaky folk might love the fact that they no longer cast shadows. Of course, losing a level stinks, but hey, this is a rough place, and you do have 3 days to get through before you theoretically would lose that stuff if you failed your save each time. All right, let's keep on keeping on here. Grim forests. Okay. I've been starting with the first one each time. Let's pick a different. There's one that's called the Evil Forest. All vegetation is evil to non-animal beings. Roll 1d6 every hour. A random character stumbles for 1d4 damage or is stung by some poisonous vine. Save versus poison or suffer -2 to all rolls for 24 hours. Whew. That's a tough one. I do like terrain or hexes that have sort of elemental or alignment affiliations. So I like the idea of an evil forest. If you have evil in your game, you could replace that with a chaotic forest. 1d6 every hour. So they didn't give the odds for that. I suppose you could make your own odds. Every hour seems a bit rough. That's a lot of d4 damages adding up. Hey, Phil, sorry. Nice to see you. Forest of Suicide. Is that place in Japan? Centuries ago, during a period of famine and war, the poorest of the villagers came to this woods one at a time and hanged themselves to remove a mouth to feed from their families. The pain and horror of these acts haunts the place, and those who travel in the forest can meet specters, voices, and new suicides hanging from tree branches. Heroes failing a save versus spells begin to feel the desire to commit the same act, and should they fail, 3 consecutive days will have to be physically restrained from doing it. That does remind me of that. I forget the name of that forest in Japan that's kind of well known, and I think they made a movie about it too. Let's see. Phil says in 5e, where concentration has to be maintained, environmental threats is a great way to contest those spells. Yeah, absolutely. Anything that might break concentration is good. That's a good point. The Forest of Suicide. So I like that one. It definitely got that Japanese forest. I wish I could remember the name of it. I like these kind of, you got to fail a few times. I also like using for saves. Saving by less than, failing your save by less than 5, failing your save by more than 5 is a way to different gradations. Maybe more than 5 does the worst thing, less than 5 does something that's going to lead to worse things. And then, of course, if you succeed, you succeed. Let's see another one. The Dance of the Alders. Spending the night in these woods is very dangerous. Around midnight, distant sounds of flutes and dancing lights might attract explorers to a glade where dark creatures looking like bewitched elves are dancing in the moonlight. The creatures invite everyone to dance with them. If a person refuses 3 times or fails the dance, a dex roll, then one of the creatures will strike him, causing a terrible disease, mummy's rot, for example. Dancing with the creatures is just exhausting. Non-stop dancers until dawn, but it will not bring any other result. So kind of a fairy. I think of the classic fairy tales. You got to go and dance. I think Darby O'Gill in The Little People has a scene sort of like that, where Darby's taken, or I forget if he falls or he's taken by the king of the leprechauns, and he has to play his fiddle while they're dancing, and it's just obviously it's not endless playing since it does end, but He's gonna play and play and play until they finally go out on their wild hunt. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, here's an interesting one. Crawlwood. The trees of this forest live in symbiosis with long-lived giant snails. The most trees grow on top of the snail's partially flattened shells. During the night, each tree crawls for about 1 to 6 feet, and all the forest is slowly moving towards or forwards in the same direction. The undergrowth is scarce as it is consumed by the snails, and the soil is often slippery with the slime left by the snails. So that's a really cool one, just in terms of kind of great imagery. I think a lot of these are going to have sort of effects and mechanics and hazards built in. This is just a really interesting thematic place, a slowly moving forest, all on the back of giant snails. And it's interesting too, the different ways your party could encounter that. They could be in some way, or the snails kind of buried so that the ground that you would feel are the shells and you might not even know it, or how big are the snails? If you're at ground level, are the trees all somewhat kind of way above you because they're going on the snails and everything's moving? Kind of a lot of different ways to envision what a forest on the backs of snails might look like. Let's see what else we got. And we have fresh waters. Oh, okay. Let's see. Where leeches, right? That one. I got to read that one. This stagnant branch of the river is so infested with carnivore parasites that even putting a finger in the water is dangerous. Anyone falling in the water has D6 rounds to roll a successful save versus death to jump back on the boat or reach the shore, or will be completely consumed without a single drop of blood or bone fragment spared. Yikes. So that's a weird one. So I like the idea of the leeches. So this is kind of an interesting thing because the name is very evocative, were leeches. But the text actually doesn't mention leeches or anything. I mean, it could be anything in the river. It could be piranhas. It could be made of acid. Anything could be happening there to cause the effect. I don't know about the save versus death to jump back on the boat. I think of that as I think of the saves is when you're avoiding something. And you could think about jumping back in the boat is avoiding being in there. But I think of it as you're trying to do something physical. So I would use like a strength or dex check. Maybe the player can pick which one to kind of get out, because that to me is them physically doing something. I would probably have the save versus death as saving against whatever damage is happening. So they don't mention damage. It's just if you don't get out in 6 rounds, you're just consumed. But then it doesn't really explain, well, what's happening to you over those 6 rounds. So I might think about, well, make a save versus death. Otherwise, you're going to take X amount of damage. And that's just going to go until you die, which might be 6 rounds, or it might be 3 rounds, or it might be 8 rounds, whatever that is. But it doesn't really matter. And then you can make a save versus death, or a dex or strength check to try to jump out of the water. The were leech part I'm really interested in. And unfortunately, with that one, I'm a little bit disappointed I don't get any kind of hint about what a were leech is, because that a lycanthrope, that's a giant leech. Sounds really interesting. Of course, I could stat it up myself. Might have to do that just to do it. But, maybe a touch of a missed opportunity. But it's inspirational. It's definitely inspired me. Okay, let's go down to another one here. Let's try the River of Skulls. Swarms of quote-unquote skull insects live around the shores of this river, so named for the colors on their backs. They produce a very loud buzz. Those who hear it and fail a save versus death are deafened for a day, while those who fail a save versus spells are confused. Those who fail both rolls are driven mad by the awful sound and will try to pluck their ears and the flesh from their heads, exposing their skulls. Yeesh. D3 damage, possible permanent damage to hearing. Okay, that is definitely gross and interesting. So you're going to make 2. So this is one I just had said before, right? Here we have, if this happens, you have to make 2 saves. And that's just, maybe intentionally, right? You're making 2 rolls. There's a higher chance you're going to fail one of the rolls. Either you're going to be deafened for the day, or you're going to be confused, or both. This is where I might pick a system and say, just make 1 save. But if you fail by 5, you're deafened for the day. If you fail by 10, you're confused. If you fail by more than 10, you're pulling your things out, or something like that. You could change the numbers and have to be 5s, right? But just a way of kind of having 1 roll. I guess You don't need to have two roles where one role could do, but I understand maybe wanting to have it as two roles because from a thematic standpoint, you want there to be a chance that they fail more than one of them. But probably chances are, especially if depending on when this is coming up, if it's at lower levels, someone's going to fail one of their saves. But that's, and it's of course it's also just a approach thing, right? My approach, make one roll but give it some gradations. Their approach is rolling two saves. Okay, those are all good. I'm going to read one more. The Entrapped Titans. 3 colossal stone hands emerge from the waters of this lake, 2 left and 1 right. 3 rebel titans have been turned to stone by the gods and are half buried in the bottom of the lake. A ritual version of stone to flesh involving the sacrifice of major artifacts of each alignment and element might be employed to free them. I like that. I would even say a ritual version of stone to flesh involving, and don't even worry about the other stuff, involving the sacrifice of major artifacts of some kind. Is enough, or even just say, hey, maybe a ritual stone of flesh of some sort, which makes for an interesting location. If you think about it, in I think Lord of the Rings and Fellowship of the Ring, right? The Argonath is kind of a really cool shot in the films, or if you've read in the books, with the 2 massive statues of kings of Gondor of old, and here you have these hands reaching out of the lake. So it just is an interesting location to pass through. That's great, and it could be an adventure location, adventure hook if someone's trying to do this, or maybe you want to do this as players. A lot of good stuff going on there. So that's waters. What's next? Okay, we get to jungles now. The City of Tigers, number 2 on the list of grim jungles. Cruel man-eating tigers inhabit this impenetrable jungle and often make forays into the neighboring villages. Legends say that in the middle of the jungle lies the terrible City of Tigers, whose pavilions are built with human bones and skin. Yummy. Cruel Rakshasas and were-tigers rule it with an iron paw. I like that. And their envoys are everywhere, hidden among men, in order to send more and more victims to the jungle. These emissaries, and all the tigers disguised as men, can be recognized because they have reversed hands and feet with thumbs and toes on the outside. So that's the classic Rakshasa image. They've got reversed, or I don't know, I guess reversed. The thumbs and stuff are on the outside rather than the inside. I guess, hands mirrored. That's really cool. I like that. The City of Tigers, ruled by Rakshasas and were-tigers. Definitely a place that could be an interesting adventure or campaign of. There's you have elements of conspiracy. You have elements of a civilization. That to me is more of, this is a real culture and civilization that's apart. There's definitely evil doings. There's going on there. Jungles, an intriguing environment. The city, made of bones, human bones, is intriguing. Let's go to number 4, the real living death. A terrible curse affects those who die in this jungle. Bacteria keep the corpses together after death and allow smaller organisms to take part of it. The dead bodies are eaten as usual by bugs, worms, centipedes, fungi, and molds, but they still maintain their structure and mass. As time goes by, all these beings, quote-unquote, become the corpse, which ultimately consists of a mass of plants, fungi, and parasites, and behaves as if it were still living and sentient, and it moves in search of food. Well, that is certainly creepy. So it's kind of like fossilization, except instead of it becoming replaced by stone, it's being replaced by scavenging bacteria, fungi, molds, centipedes, worms, bugs, etc. That's super creepy. Very cool. I like that one a lot. And I like the idea there might be these kind of shambling mounds, I want to say, but in more of a humanoid form, that are roving this jungle looking for food and potentially beyond. And I'm sure that if there are outposts on the outsides of this jungle, they have to be on guard, right? Who can try to make sure if somebody's coming out of the jungle towards the settlement that they're them and not a living death. And then how do you figure that out? Is it obvious looking at them? Did they keep the skin kind of whole? Is it like the bug suit in Men in Black, where it's more or less from the outside, from a distance anyway, it looks pretty much like the person, but it's only on close up? What would you use to identify them? Are there spells? Are there examinations would use dogs, like with Terminators or something, where you have the dogs sniff them out. So very cool. And I'll do one more of these before I move on. Grim Scales. This jungle has no mammals nor birds. Equivalent creatures are all reptiles, and all are ferocious predators: scaly monkeys, bat-winged lizards, slinky, cold-blooded scale tigers. Hey, short and sweet, but very cool, right? Just think about it. You enter this jungle and everything has gone reptilian. I actually did something like that, an encounter I talked about in one of my earlier streams, where I basically took beavers, but I reimagined them as reptiles, but they did kind of beaverish things. So I could definitely see expanding that outwards and having a whole area that's just, for whatever reason, reptiles have taken over all the roles. All right, let's go. Mountains and hills. How am I doing on time, by the way? Okay, about halfway through time, and I feel like I'm a little bit past halfway through the book. So we'll see here. So these are Grim Mountains and Hills. Again, as with all the other ones, we have 10 choices. I'm not going to read them all, but I'll read some that look interesting. Phil says, oh, that would be fun for druids, collecting animal types to become how exotic flavor. Yes, indeed. Yes, a lot of these are, I mean, obviously these are all kind of outdoorsy stuff. So fun for druids, rangers, any other wilderness types. They're in their element. It's not you're out of your element, Donnie. All right. What one looks good here? Blood red water. All sources of water in these mountains are blood red. Even if the smell seems normal, animals do not drink it. The water is mildly poisonous and causes 1d4 temporary damage to dex to those failing a save versus petrification. 1 point recovered per day. I like that. That's a cool effect. Water looks like blood. Animals won't touch it. And if you touch it, it's going to reduce your dex by 1d4 points if you fail a save versus petrification. And you get back. I like those kinds of ability damages, especially if you're using roll under ability scores as a method. Then those can hurt, and of course, it can be fatal. I have some of my players. I think at least one player has only a 6 in one of his attributes. Might be dexterity. So, you get down to suddenly you have 1 or 2 dex. With all the penalties to what any other kind of dex checks and anything like that, like all of a sudden it becomes potentially very dangerous, particularly in your mountains or hills where you might need to make dex checks. It can be bad for them. Okay, let's see. We got the Black Mirror, Blood of the Elves, the Eternal Battle, the Gray Path, the Shadow Grip. Is that grip or griff? Grip, Shadow Grip, I think. The Mountain Queen, Executioner Hell. Let's go to the Gray Path. The only way to avoid climbing up the sides of these mountains is a narrow, winding path covered in gray ash. The trail is cursed and charged with negative energy. After 1 day, all food and water rots, clothes start to wear out, metal begins to rust, and all creatures grow 1 year older. Going all the way along the path in both directions has much worse effects. Only magic items are granted a save to avoid falling apart. Characters age 6d6 years. Yeah, that's pretty bad. The fifth element, horror. Yes, indeed. Gosh, the Gray Path is rough. I like it. I like it. I like the idea of you're aging as you're going up. I like the idea of things falling apart. 66 years. I've always had issues with the aging stuff because it kind of messes up humans much worse than anybody else. If you're an elf and you're a young elf, aging 36 years max, no sweat off your brow. Even if I think for a dwarf, it's not that big of a deal. I guess if you have halflings in your game, I think they're more human aged, maybe a little more, so that's more of a pain. And of course, humans, you go from being kind of a young kid to middle aged in a heartbeat. Maybe there's some ways around it. And of course, this is something that is part of the known lore in your world. You can always work into what do you need to do to avoid the aging? Do you need to take potions? Do you need to have certain magical artifacts? Do you need to have a blessing? So on and so forth. So you have options. I wouldn't want to find myself on there by accident if I was already playing a middle-aged human. Let's see. Should I do one more here? We'll do the Mountain Queen. This mountain range is infested by several tribes of orcs, hobgoblins, their lesser slaves, and other bigger and more dangerous humanoids as allies. They seem to have made an alliance and are preparing to launch a great attack on civilization under the banner of the Snake Mistress, an antediluvian 13 HD Medusa sorceress with the torso and head of a woman and a dozen huge snakes instead of legs and arms, hidden somewhere on or maybe under the mountain and scheming to destroy mankind. All right, so that's really cool. So it really is a campaign hook, right? The evil humanoids are gathering in the mountains, and they serve this Medusa sorceress. I mean, that's a hell of a combo. I mean, Medusas are rough enough, and now you add sorceress on top of it. And I like that the torso and head of a woman and a dozen huge snakes instead of legs and arms. It definitely makes for a creepy abomination type of appearance, even more so than I think than a regular Medusa. We've got plains. I guess that's intentional. The Grim's upside down there. Grim plains and valleys. I'll just read a couple of these. Let's start at the end. The blistered land. This plain is desolate and barren. The soil is a mix of dried, cracked earth and areas of stinking mud. From the creeks, I think they mean cracks on the ground, all kinds of oozes and slimes emerge to feed on each other and any other creatures they find. Well, that is horrifying. Oozes, all kinds of oozes and slimes emerging. I definitely would like to know more. I kind of feel like I wouldn't mind if they gave a little bit more text there just to tell me more about this, but it adds some really interesting possibilities for what's going on there. Where are all these things coming from? What's underneath the blistered land? Because clearly the surface may be all cracked and desolate, but at least there's something cool. And I gotta think wet, because how could I kind of think of oozes and slimes as not being able to survive in a very dry environment. I think of them in wet places, damp places. So is there kind of an aquifer or some kind of water, fetid, disgusting water source that they all live in during the day and maybe they emerge at night? And what do they leave behind? Are there bones and other things you might see behind you? Something in my ear that you might see. Definitely creepy. Divermus mysterius. Divermus mysterius. A rare breed of white worm can be found in the soil of this secluded valley. It is said that they can cure all diseases and give immortality. To achieve these effects, it is necessary to swallow at least 2 pounds of living worms without chewing. Say versus poison, not to puke. Yes, indeed. Those completing this task actually become immune to most diseases and regenerate 1 hit point per hour. Their body, however, becomes full of worms, and their mind and physiology begin to change into something more and more alien. All right, well, this is very good. Certainly, man, flavor out the wazoo. White worms, and you got to swallow a whole 2 pounds without just... Ugh. Just thinking about that makes me want to vomit. And then, hey, you get regeneration, 1 HP per hour, which is, I mean, look, it's good. I mean, it's not great, but I'd rather have some regeneration than none. You do get immunity most diseases, but you start to become more wormish. Or I think of maybe being more wormish. We could think of either other. What is behind the worms, right? Maybe there's something that the worms become, and that is that alienness. Maybe this is how they procreate, make more worms. Roman Live says, but those worm poops the next day. Yes. Yeah, where do those worms go? It says as you become full of worms. Do they do they just digest your innards but still allow you to function just more wormishly? I mean, it's creepy. There's a lot. I mean, there are some body horror possibilities. Tons of them in that setting. Here we get seas and islands. Coral undead. The islands of this sea are troubled by an exotic plague. On the darkest seabeds, black corals grow around the dead bodies and keep them animated as the cruel and famous quote-unquote coral undead. They act like the most common undead, but can walk on the seabed for centuries and reach their prey on the islands. Moreover, their solid body absorbs most hits and is particularly resistant to both fire and frost. A powerful necromancer might turn the coral undead into a fearsome army. Let's see. Worms out the belly button. Yeah, that's pretty nasty. So here we have undead, but it seems like they are this. I mean, I think of undead being able to kind of walk on the seabeds already, but maybe they become calcified like corals, and that's why their bodies are particularly resistant to punishment. I do like the idea of them walking on the bottom of the sea. Didn't they do that in one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies? Didn't they have the undead walking on the bottom of the sea? Someone who's seen some of those or remembers those movies more than I do can comment. Let's see. There's the Archipelago of Terrors. On each of these 6 islets, a temple was built where the prime terrors were lured with great treasures. Now, each of these undying creatures cannot leave the island because of an imprisoning spell. They are Medusa, a Minotaur, a Cyclops, a Demon Boar, a Gorgon, and a Hydra. Each has 3 times its original HD and treasure. The Medusa, Minotaur, and Cyclops might be capable of using the magic items included in their treasure, while cults of chaos might want to set these monsters free. Actually, killing one will lift the spell that imprisons the others. That's really sneaky. So I like the idea. Creatures of chaos, and they're not just the regular creatures, right? They are almost the paradigm creatures, right? These are the potentially the kind of like the, I don't know, the perfect versions. The paragons are trapped. To free the others, you got to kill one. I mean, the one thing that's interesting, maybe just in the size, they're not all the same power level. Like I think a Medusa is much more powerful than a Minotaur. And in a Minotaur, a Demon Boar, I'm not sure what a Demon Boar would be. Maybe that would be on the same level. I mean, a Hydra, Gorgon, I don't know. There's definitely a lot going on there. But it has a lot of interesting things. There's whole adventures in there. If you're the party and maybe you're being tricked into freeing them, maybe you're trying to stop somebody else from freeing them. Certainly that fits in with the kind of law and chaos. If forces of chaos want to try to free them, maybe they want to try to free all of them. And there's kind of a sneaky thing, right? There's kind of a twist in an adventure, because if you get in there and you're trying to stop this cult, and then maybe they fool you, or they try to fool you into killing one because they realize that's how they're going to do it, but they can't, or they don't want to kill one. So they say, oh, these good guys, we can fool them into killing them. It's got some good stuff in there. Let's see. The Sea of Madness. These waters are possessed by maddened ghosts of ancient battles. Every night there's a 10% chance of being attacked by the spirits. I'm not sure why attacked is in quotes, but it is. One random member of the crew must save her spell or be possessed and forced to attack anyone in sight. If the first victim fails to save, another one will be chosen by another spirit, and so on. The spirits possessing sailors are of 2 different factions, so they will attack each other, and should the whole crew be possessed, after the inevitable battle, there will only be one side left, who will sail in a random direction until reaching out of these waters and lead the survivors on a ship full of slaughter. Clerics and shamans may try to turn the possessing spirits. A Demon Boar traps you and blathers on about cryptocurrency for hours. Yeah, I think there are too many of those Demon Boars out on the internet these days. I can't even go to some forums without being harassed by cryptocurrency spells. That's interesting about the madness. It doesn't really feel like it's madness to me, as more as undead thing. I like the idea of spirits taking over trying to take over the crew and having to do battle. I suppose it appears like madness whenever they would sail out of there, and it's like a death ship. Pretty interesting. We also get swamps and marshes. They are really covering ground of different terrain types, which I like. I like it very much. We have a tidal marsh. Once a day, this region below the sea level is flooded by salty tides from the nearby sea. At that moment, dangerous marine creatures like merfolk, deep ones, sahuagin, or scum. Is there a creature called scum? I haven't heard about them. Can get on the dry land and attack. For the rest of the day, the area is inhospitable, an inhospitable place, devoid of animals and edible plants, without potable water, and infested with vermin and mosquitoes. Yeah, so it's really just kind of a general thing, but I like it. I like the idea that at certain time, the tide comes in and brings in all this nasty stuff. It very much has a Lovecraftian angle to it, if you want to play that up. If you do want to use deep ones or some other merfolk that come into this area at certain times and then go back out with the tides. Certainly an interesting location to put a dungeon or some other ruin that you want your players to go into, because maybe they got to go in there between the tides, or what happens if they're in there and the tide's coming in, and that's, besides the water, it's bringing in all these kind of creatures. We've got the King Under the Swamp. A beautiful and mysterious woman often appears in the swamp and promises to help the explorers. She offers to lead them to the King Under the Swamp to enjoy the banquet of the new moon. The king and his court do not want to hurt or kill visitors, but invite them to a banquet in their underground hall among the roots, full of delicious drinks, refreshing foods, and small gifts. Other guests are present, and everyone seems happy, thanks to the exciting and stimulating drugs in the drinks. If PCs join the banquet, after the revels, the mixtures in the food begin to take effect. As soon as the heroes fall asleep, they will begin to become mandrakes, vegetable beings of humanoid form, like the king and his inner court. Characters who have become mandrakes retain their freedom and abilities, but are affected by all effects that apply to plants. So that's kind of an interesting encounter, right? So you can come, you can banquet, but you're going to get turned into a plant being. If you become a plant being, you just become a plant being. Your type changes to plants. If you're in a system that has types, then anything that would affect plants could affect you. But on the other hand, things that would affect, I would assume, humans and humanoids would no longer affect you. It might actually be a little bit of a win. Though there might be some interesting things. What do you do with eating and drinking? Do they just eat and drink as normal? Do you have to plant yourself in the ground for a certain amount of time? Do you need the sun for a certain amount of time? Do you pollinate at some time? So there could be a lot of fun in there. And I'll do one more, the Flooded Necropolis. The swamp was once a great necropolis. The marsh has flooded the crypts with mud and debris, and the restless dead have become underwater undead, amphibious, and very jealous of their treasures. So that's cool. So it's taking a standard kind of fantasy trope. Now we're putting it underwater, and you might think, well, that's been done before. Yeah, sure it has, but now we've added this other twist, which is that the undead have adapted themselves to the water. They're not just hanging around or floating, and it's not the case of, say, a structure that you go in the water and then you pop out into dry land and adventure's normal. You will have to be underwater the entire time, and of course you'll need the spells or items or whatever potions to do that. And the undead are going to be swimming and flying around in the water, making things particularly troublesome for you. And we also have wastelands. Not a teenage wasteland, or maybe it is a teenage wasteland. This specter or ghost looks like they could be a little bit. They could have been a teen. Let's see. We've got the Slime Waste. All animals, people, and monsters in this desolate land have undergone a horrid mutation. Their skin, flesh, and bones have turned into some kind of jelly, slime, or ooze, even though their bodies have retained their shape. They shamble around in packs made of humans, animals, and monsters looking for flesh like zombies. Each pack is made of creatures turned into one kind of jelly only, so they're all the same color. Different color groups will fight each other fiercely. They have all the skills of the jelly or ooze that has replaced their flesh, but retain their original movement capabilities. Characters wounded by these creatures must save once to avoid contagion, poison, or a new save will be necessary every day to avoid losing 1 point of your intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. If one of these abilities reaches 0 before the character finds a cure, he turns into a mindless ooze person. During the time between contagion and cure, or final doom, the character can use all the special abilities of the ooze once per day. All right. Ooze people, oozinoids, or human oozes. Oozoids, jellyoids, gelloids. I like them. They're kind of cool. So they're basically jellies, but they're taken on these humanoid or animal forms, and they wander around this clearly grim wasteland looking for flesh. It's definitely a nice twist. Let's see. We have the Moors of Sorrow. These misty moors spread despair in the hearts of those who cross them. This effect is neither psychological nor magical, but physical, because the yellow mists are full of poisonous gases that lead those who breathe them to apathy. Each day a save versus poison is necessary to avoid a -4 to all rolls. So basically disadvantage on everything if you fail a save versus poison. So that would make me sad. I would definitely be sad if I had to do that. And then one more of these. the rotten land. In this corrupted wasteland, the decay of the land is due to a proliferation of giant larvae. I think they mean burrowing, or no, borrowing the soil. All right, so hold on. Proliferation of giant larvae borrowing the soil and eating each other. The giant flies that survive and develop from the larvae attack everyone they see and can transmit horrible diseases, but get distracted if they smell honey. Oh, that's interesting, because I don't really think of flies and honey, or maybe they do. Flies, you track more flies with honey than vinegar. Yeah, I guess there is flies. Sure. Well, that one. So the one thing I don't understand is borrowing. I think they mean burrowing. Like these larvae are kind of burrowing through the soil, and they eat each other. And then whichever one of those larvae obviously survive to become a pupa. Well, my daughter just did insect studies, and I've already forgotten. Whatever, they survive enough, they turn into giant flies, and the giant flies will potentially attack folk and transmit horrible diseases. It just definitely seems like a disgusting place. I could imagine maybe if you have this place, a high point, you're looking down and you sort of see the land is kind of moving, it seems like, and that's just because of all these larvae that are just kind of swimming, to use a better word, or over the surface and just always in combat with each other. All right, so and then we get the open game license. All right, so I made it through one of these books in an hour. That is great. So look at so what I will do is a little teaser for tomorrow, or the next stream of this. We will do the encounters. Some of these areas also seem to kind of have encounters, but it's definitely had more of a focus on an area, on a location. Let me know in the chat and the comments what you think of it. I'm down with it. As usual with these kind of books, sometimes I always just want more, but I think that's a good thing. I think that's what these books should inspire you. And now I could see reading through some of these and pulling out my own notes and filling in all the details that are beneath the surface of these entries. They're all D10 tables, which is nice. I like that they cover a lot of different areas. So if I'm looking for something I want to throw at my players and they're entering a hex, I can flip through and find the kind of hex terrain that I want. I think it covers most everything. Maybe the only ones I don't think it doesn't have is maybe a snow or tundra one, but we could use wasteland for one of those. I think it covers just about all your regular ones. Maybe there's not a coast. No, there was a coastal one because that had like coasts and sea. Yeah, Phil, glad you like it. It's great stuff. Yeah, so I think tomorrow I'll be doing the next one. So please tune in tomorrow. As usual with these, please give the thumbs up to the video wherever you're watching it, or whatever heart button you have to show that you like it. If indeed you liked it, of course, subscribe wherever you are, or follow me and wherever you're watching it to do that part. That also helps me a lot. Have a great rest of your day, evening, whenever you are listening to this. If you guys are coming in late, I am just wrapping up, but please just go back to the beginning of the vid, watch it over again. This was Land of Legends Grim. We're going over the areas. This was by Axian Spice, who was kind enough to send this to me. Tomorrow I will be doing where does my cursor go? Lands of Legends Grim Encounter. So tune back in. Until then, talk to you later. Game on. Ciao.